Welcome to 3 Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Caines, and Ed Mann.
Hello and welcome to another episode of 3 Devs and a Maybe. My name's Ed Mann, and today we are joined by, one other person, and that will be Mickey B. But it's very happy to have you on the podcast again, dude. It's been way too long.
I feel like you undersold me there.
I did. I just said, and we only have. But no, the man, the myth, the legends.
Thank you. Yeah. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's only good. You see, now you're underselling this now. You need to be like, it's great to be here.
It's great to be here.
There we go. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Really good.
Whoa, you know?
Yeah.
So much you have to breathe out. Like, whoa. Anyway, I don't know why this is. Yeah, that's the start of it. It's only me and Mickey here today, but we thought we'd have. It's been a couple of weeks now since we've done like a real recording. Yeah. So I did a batch of them. We did like a batch of them with other guests and stuff, and we haven't really had a ramble podcast in a while. And I'm sure there's lots of things. Well, we met up last week, obviously, but we didn't really get to talk too much tech.
We did.
But yeah, no. So yeah, how are things going, Mickey?
Well, first of all, before I answer that question, can we have a little birthday shout-out section? Is that allowed?
I think we might as well. I mean, you know, this podcast has no rules, apart from one rule, to break the rules. No. I have no idea.
So, happy birthday, KCB. Have a wonderful time in Bath. In Bath.
Good choice. She's going to Bath. Who's she going to Bath with?
Family, I think.
Very nice. Good choice. Good shout. Yeah, I went there a couple of months ago. It's very good.
Her brother got her a MacBook Air for her
even
her birthday.
Better. That is a really nice brother, actually. Yeah. My brother. Yeah. It was my birthday earlier this month. All cool people. Yes. Well, you obviously know the day of the birthday, seeing as it's where you should do, or I should be a terrible, terrible father if you don't remember your child's birthday.
Forgotten.
You've forgotten, exactly. Yeah. You did forget. It was quite funny. I was like, saying happy birthday to T-Bone, and you were like, oh yeah, I forgot. And you're like, oh, unbelievable.
Can we just clarify, I forgot your birthday, not my son's birthday.
Yeah, absolutely. You forgot my birthday. Absolutely, yeah. You remember T-Bone.
Which is on the same day, but
it's on the same day, exactly. But no, it was interesting because obviously looking through it, I looked at the picture you tweeted out last year of you with Toby, and I'm just like, he has grown insane. It's just like, what the hell? Yeah. Babies are crazy.
He's walking now.
Yeah. But yeah, so talking about brothers, obviously her brother got her a lovely MacBook Air. My brother got me a Yankee Candle I wanted. I'm not
really.
I'm not going to be embarrassed by saying I like a good Yankee Candle. I like things smelling good.
Favourite scent or?
Well, I'll go with the cappuccino one, this coffee one. So, I like my coffee, so I thought, it's quite nice. So, yeah. Didn't even bother wrapping it. Didn't even get a card. Just literally, it was an Amazon box order. But I should take it as, it was nice that he thought about me, Yeah. Love you, brother. Anyway, so, yeah, how are things going there, man? Like, what's going on in the Mickey world?
So, non-tech wise, I've been building my pizza oven, which has been fun.
Yeah, how is that going? I've seen that all over Facebook.
Stage 2 is happening. So I've got my concrete base in, and then tomorrow I'm going to start building up the brick base, and it's I think it's vermiculite plinth, which the actual dome will sit on.
Absolutely.
So that's stage 2. So
are you splitting it out into stages, or is it already is there a pre-stage thing you found online, like a YouTube video of a 10-year-old who like a master, pizza oven craver?
The thing is, I think when I'm coding, well, actually, I say this, probably don't actually, but I like to think that I'll take my time and I'll plan a little bit. Whereas when it comes to DIY, I'm just like, bang, 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 just do it. So I'm really trying to discipline myself this time, and so I am put into stages for that reason, that I'll just take it slow. And I must have watched over 80, 90 videos now on YouTube on how to build a pizza oven. So I just want to make sure I get it right. And I've already made mistakes, to be fair, but they're not horrendous ones. So
do all the videos have like conflicting, messages?
Not so much. Not so much conflicting.
Like do this, do that. No, I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it, and so I'm just kind of taking bits and pieces. There's like a really hippie way of doing it, and then there's like a really I guess more professional way of doing it, and I'm just taking bits from both. So yeah, I'll put some pictures on Twitter, because probably more people follow me on Twitter than I've got friends on Facebook from the show. So yeah, I'll put some on Twitter when stage 2 is complete. And then,
I like that. How many stages are there?
I'm hoping maybe 4.
4 stages. So, 4 stages to a pizza oven. I like it. Very cool.
Exactly.
And in work, yeah? What are you up to in work?
Work, just been working on 3 or 4 sort of e-commerce sites, and not really anything new, but one thing I have done, and sort of taken this idea from Stack Overflow, but also from Laravel 5, and probably previous version of Laravel, and I think you've been telling me about this for years, and I've just got around to doing it, but I kind of like did a bit of a review of my code, and I was trying to see like if there was any security flaws, and I wasn't very happy with like one of the ways I was doing something was with Ajax, and it wasn't like horribly insecure, but like I think because all the headers like were easily viewable, and I was like exposing lots of variable names and stuff, I wasn't happy with that, and I sort of got around it by doing the CSRF token method that Taylor uses in Laravel.
Yep.
You know, the one I use.
Yep. You make sure that you're only creating it through there, so you don't get any of this horrible, cross-site request forgery.
Exactly, and I think that's pretty safer than IP checks, right? Because they can be masked and
either's good. I mean, it depends what you're trying to do. So that type of stuff's very useful because you do want to check to make sure that if someone, because I mean, the old kind of example is Twitter. I think used to be able to do through a GET request. You used to be able to send a tweet.
Right, okay.
So what you could do is then put on a page an image, an image source, a hidden image that had just this, malicious URL, which was, send a tweet out, maybe some spam. And obviously, if you were logged into that session already through Twitter, it would be like, oh yeah, I can go to Twitter and I'm already logged in, so I'll post it. And you would be none the wiser. Right. So this allows you to say, look, you have to be on that page with that session, and here's the secret message or secret code token at this time. For this request. Yeah. So no, it's a really good idea. It's a very important idea. It's funny because obviously all these frameworks and stuff we use kind of do such a good job of hiding that from us, so we don't have to worry about it, which is quite funny because then, obviously these are really important things, but
until you then work on something bespoke and you have to worry about it. But I guess just continuing from your point then with the sessions and stuff, is that approach still vulnerable to session hijacking, which I know you talked about in another show?
Yeah,
it is.
So session hijacking, the only way you can really get around that is if you're using HTTPS, because then everything's encrypted. Other ways are, I released I think it was last year, like a session blog thing, which did some kind of security things. Like it would because you can do regenerate. Because I remember you sending me session regenerate ID, and you can regenerate the ID. So because what essentially happens is that a malicious man in the middle finds out what your session ID is and can just use that because that's the session ID you're passing back to the server. The server doesn't know, none the wiser. So things you can check are like is it coming from the same IP address? Because in case different IP, that's a bit wishy-washy because people have shared IPs, so it's a bit kind of like how secure you want to be on that, because I mean if they're in the coffee shop they're going to use the same IP, so this is the thing. Things like session regeneration, so what happens is that if they make a request, you can do like a 1 in 5 times it will regenerate the session ID, which is a performance thing because because obviously you have to regenerate the ID and send it back to them, but it means then that the session that they got, the attacker, is now been invalidated. That's kind of nice things to do, but really the best way of doing it is by HTTPS and SSLs doing that, because, or TLS as we want, but so that really is kind of the best way, but you can get around it with doing other ways, because I mean again what essentially is happening though is that if you don't use the secure connection, it's all plain text, so anything you do pass through can be seen. Right, I'm with you.
So I've been doing that work, and then privately, I've been doing a bit of freelance, which I've almost finished now. And so I think I told you before, but
you're like the person who writes a book. They write the first book and they say, "I'm never going to write a book again. It was such a taxing experience." And then like 5 minutes later, okay, I'm writing a book again. It's like you just like shooting yourself in the foot, don't you, mate?
It's so true. But this one, I've actually really enjoyed this project, and it's gone flawlessly. And like I demoed it to the client the other day, and they loved it. And it was like, it was just really good experience. And I think because I was doing it with another developer as well, and he's done all the front end stuff, the stuff that I don't really enjoy doing. it's worked really well. So I've really enjoyed working.
Can you give any details, like how you were using Laravel 5 and stuff like that? Like what the best bits were you enjoyed? Yeah,
I mean, I think I said to you before that like I feel really guilty because I've not been using a lot of the latest PHP stuff because of my master stuff. So now, like, I did get a chance to use it. I've just really been playing with like Eloquent and what's the templating thing? Blade, migrations, all the kind of fun stuff that comes with it. And yeah, I've just really enjoyed it. It's been really effortless process. Actually, there was like a little bit of a learning curve, but it wasn't too steep. And I think the last version Laravel used was like Laravel 3. It's very
definitely
very different. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, just playing with that stuff. It's been really cool, to be honest with you. Really
that's nice
it.
because you'll be able to experiment with it, and then I mean, hopefully, bring it into the workplace by saying, "Look, I've used it outside of work. It worked." Experience. Hopefully, because I mean, primarily, what type of frameworks and stuff are you using at work at the moment? Is it still CodeIgniter, Laravel 4 stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Well, not even Laravel 4. It has been the only sort of like framework project we've done have been Laravel. CodeIgniter. Yeah, so it's pretty old school stuff, but I'm hoping now. I've used it a lot with this freelance project that I can kind of push it with work for the next sort of big project we do. So, yeah, see how it goes.
That's really cool.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah. I was going to ask you, though. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, like, because of the... So you're saying about Ajax stuff and everything, and that was an interesting thing, because I've been... I'll talk about it a bit later on, about the project we're doing and everything at work, the React stuff. And an interesting little one is the stand... Well, so what's happened is they've written a standard for... doing Ajax requests is a bit of a pain. Obviously we all use jQuery. We blow it out with jQuery because it's easier to use because, you have to make these XML, HTTP request objects, blah, blah, blah. And there's actually a standard now out, which is called Fetch. And I don't know if you've heard of Fetch.
No.
Fetch is quite fetching. So GitHub have made a good polyfill for it. And essentially what it is it follows a very similar kind of way you would think of what jQuery does with gets, with fetching things, fetching, resources and stuff like that. So, you can use it for, exactly how you would use, like an Ajax request. I want to do a post here or put there or whatever. But it also uses the new ES6 promises. And that essentially, allows you then to chain these things together and stuff like that. And so it's a really awesome way. It allows you to do the easy use case of what you would normally expect, but also then provide you with the promised stuff, which is awesome and a good way of coordinating code and kind of like organizing asynchronous events. But yeah, I thought I'll put that in the show notes because that is a really interesting, and it's so nice being able to just assume it's there now, this idea of fetching without having to bring in a boatload of jQuery. Because I mean, at work now, a lot of our work at work is to get rid of jQuery, which is kind of crazy. Because it's...
Is that the way it's going now, then, you think?
I think so. Well, because we're now deprecating support for browsers. Recently, last week, we actually removed support for IE8. So... Wow. Because of percentage, we run a percentage model, so if anything goes under a certain percentage, we don't support it because it's not justifiably viable. Well, I'm on a roll here today. It's not viable to the business to keep supporting these browsers, and things like that. Where one of the jokes was, we get to now remove like Pi. Do you remember PHP? Not PHP, IE Pi and stuff like that for rounded corners.
The
and
polyfill type thing.
That's it, yeah. So we get to remove that, and around it. A lot of this whole jQuery stuff goes because, the reasons why we're using it could become so minimal. And it's just there because we use it, because we were used to it now. But, in this new project we're doing, we're using React and ReactJS and stuff like that. And we are very much trying to, we take advantage of ES6 stuff. We compile it down into ES5 support, using Babel and Webpack. So we don't, we're very much kind of, the landscape of JavaScript now is so much nicer, and it's so much better to use a standard such as Fetch and then a polyfill if required than using something like jQuery if you don't need to, because eventually all browsers, or all users using these browsers will have a browser that supports this, implementation. And you can remove the polyfill, but if you're using something like jQuery, it's proprietary, it's not, a standard. So yeah, that's me rehabbing on, but that essentially is kind of, an awesome thing.
Awesome. Well, before I ask you about how you've been and stuff, I kind of like following this Laravel thing, and I messaged you about it the other night to ask what's going on with this whole a little spat about a design pattern that Taylor was using that was dangerous, and you sort of explained it to me on WhatsApp. But I wondered if you could go through that again for anyone who like read that. And
so I'm sorry, I haven't been keeping up to date. But essentially, is it to do with the fact that it uses facades, and then that's bad because it's static and all that fun stuff?
Well, look, I didn't see any mention of facades. I just saw it was, and I thought it was like a guy who was good mates with Taylor. That's why I was quite surprised. I'm trying to think it was now. But no, I didn't see facades mentioned, but someone mentioning that one of the design patterns he was using was dangerous. That's quite a statement. Say it's dangerous.
What design pattern do you remember? What one? Is it Singleton?
I don't think it was even mentioned, but it was probably in the chain somewhere. But I'll tell you what. You tell us what you've been up to, and I will have a little. Oh no, I can't because of my keyboard noise.
That's all right. Essentially, the funny thing is, right? So, I think once you get a big project, this is funny one actually with it and everything, and we've now got, you get these kind of, people will say things and there'll be negative comments and there'll be good comments and stuff like that. And it was funny actually because me and Joe Watkins, so we did that. I don't know if I mentioned it to you last week. We, we did the 3 devs first screencast. I got to release that, which was great. We put it on Reddit. And Reddit, there was like some, a lot of people viewed it, which was awesome. But the only comments we did get were kind of negative, actually. And quite, some of them, if you put them, I put a lens over them that was kind of like, okay, I'm trying to get, constructive criticism out of it. You can. But a lot of it was just, pretty much them just being trolly. This is the thing, it was interesting talking to Joe. Then he was saying, they did come up with some valid points, but the way they were doing it wasn't exactly constructive. And people are going to slate things, and people are going to hate and people are going to love and all this stuff. So yeah, aside from that, that's kind of like the internet. You when you put something out there, like we're putting this out there to here today, you expect either good stuff or bad stuff, but you're probably going to get more bad stuff. But, that's on you to then taking that into that consideration. Okay, can I consider this, what they've said, constructive? Can I put this into, how will I change something in the future? Or will you just say, look, that to me, that comment doesn't help, I'm ignoring it. It doesn't mean that the comment they said is valid or not. It's just like I'm ignoring that comment because it doesn't help me. So, that's an interesting way of kind of thinking. But yeah, other than that, it was interesting. So, design patterns aren't dangerous. Nothing is dangerous if you use it the right way, which is obviously, thinking, like a knife is dangerous in the wrong hands, but, it can be useful in other ways. So I think the issue is, the whole facade thing has been around for years now. And it's kind of like a running joke is that, the way that they use static things, and it's not really static. And it, especially when you're starting off, it can look like voodoo magic, like similar like jQuery does. But really what it's doing is just, it's just doing the magic static methods and on objects and allowing you then to take an instance. It is using instance-based stuff, but it's just providing you a nice syntax sugar for it. Which is great, but things such as, Symfony don't show that. So they just show you what's actually happening under the hood, which is great for that as well, because then you don't get this extra layer of cruft. But, it's not bad. Singletons are bad. It was funny, actually, there's a tweet just today, I think it was, Ken Beck posted, and it was essentially a global regex find and replace, which is singleton, replace it with global variable. And I thought that was hilarious, because essentially that is what a singleton is a global variable, right. Is something that you can access all the time, and you're going to get the same instance, and you can change it, and you don't know, it's not easy to test, because you can't create an instance of it, mock it up in a certain way. You can, I suppose you can in isolation, but you can't easily do things, and I guess, for me, like the way that it was done, facades aren't like that. Facades aren't bad. They aren't bad because they're just hiding what's, good design principles underneath. And I think Laravel's doing a really good job with, I haven't actually had a proper look at Laravel 5 really, because I've been very much in the Symfony world this year. But what I can see is it's providing a very much like a Ruby on Rails kind of approach, but for, people in the PHP world. And we're getting a lot of good syntactic sugar now on things, so we can make things look very nice and fluent, eloquent, and that stuff. And, for me, it's about because the way I think they're building, that Taylor's building up is that, it's very easy to start off with, you can get a project going, but it's also after that initial approach, because a lot of the problems can be is that you make something that's very easy to build up and running. So say you've got a project idea, you get an MVP out, you know, a minimum viable product, and you're like, okay, this is great, it's working now. But the code base may end up being scrapped for then doing, in quotes, a grown-up framework now or something, you know, such as Zend or Symfony, because, you know, you need to now handle a lot more things, and you want to be implementing these deep down, you know, implementations like Remember Me, maybe completely different now or something like that. But whereas I think what Taylor's doing is he's kind of making it so, you know, you can start off quick, but also it's able to expand with you after the fact. And I think that's a very hard thing to do, and I think he's doing it quite well. So, you know, I think that's really good. But yeah, you're going to get haters everywhere.
Sad though, isn't it? I felt sorry for Taylor the other day. I mean, I'm sure he's used to it, and it's like water off a duck's back now. But I just kind of think, well,
you know what? I don't think
if you think you can do better, just do it.
I don't think people do get used to it. Like, I think they're all humans. I think they're all like us. Agree. I think, you know, for us, it does hurt, because it's like, well, you know, you either kind of retreat and you say, I'm never doing it again, or you become very stubborn, or you kind of have to take a very much an approach of like, okay, what they've said is that I am either going to ignore it or I'm going to act on it. So I found Taylor's comment on Twitter was basically, it says, confession, I tune people out who use the word dangerous in regards to following or not following given design patterns. And that's just like basically what we've just said, really. It's not dangerous if you do things in the right way, I guess. Well, that's it, because, you know, this is it, isn't it? I mean, that's an interesting one, actually. But it's interesting, you know, you're very much heavily involved now in the Laravel stuff, particularly in your own time, which is quite cool, because I remember the time when you didn't want to move from Code Ignited to Laravel, you know, and...
Didn't want to move from procedural PHP.
Well, this is it, you know. God, even back in the day.
Still don't. Still holding on for a revival.
Still believing in it, eh? But it's interesting how things change and everything, you know, and how like things, and like a good segue from that is actually the work that I'm doing. So, you know, we've at our work now. So currently at work, we're doing a very big kind of React project. And essentially, so React, for people who don't know, there's a couple of really good blog posts out there on it. I'll put them in the show notes. A couple of good podcasts on it. I'll put it in the show notes. And essentially, like, bundled up, React is simply something that's from Facebook. The idea is it's a view layer, and what it does is it's kind of the buzz thing about it is it's got this idea of a virtual DOM. Which allows you then to keep constantly. So the idea is that you get away from this two-way binding thing where you don't know what the source of truth is. The idea that, you know, say I'm updating that button and the button's changing. You know, I'm clicking on that button, or the button of the star was in there and stuff like that. What happens is you change that state all the time. So you're saying, okay, the state of this button now is blue. The state of it is now, you're very declarative. You're not telling it how it does it. And what essentially happens then is, you know, this now new print of, okay, this is what it should look like now. It's very state machine based, where this is what it should look like now. The DOM, the actual virtual DOM does a diff on what's currently in the DOM with the minimal changes that need to happen. So you can now keep looking at things such a, you know, in a way that I'm replacing the whole DOM each time, which is a great, nice way to feel. And it's a very easy, intuitive way to now think is that, okay, I'm constantly replacing that. I never have to worry about the state. I can never get into an invalid state almost, because I'm constantly changing it, you know, based on that. And it deals with the, you know, the performance requirements, because hitting the DOM's hard. There's actually a couple of other projects, you know, following on from this, you know, and actually, along with that is the React stuff is the component side of things. Or actually, I suppose, no, actually it's not. I think that's more to do with the Flux, which I'll talk about a bit later on. But yeah, so, you know, this is the kind of thing, you know, very declarative. It's doing this, it's now that, it's now that, it's now that, it's now that, and it will do the diff for you and do the performance stuff. And as I say, there's other projects out there that do things like this similarly. We actually had a company in last week to just do like a little tech meetup thing, and they were talking about, you know, wanting to move some stuff over to React because they've heard a lot of good things from their Backbone implementation. And a lot of the problems they have now is the rendering like massive collections in Backbone, because they don't know what state it's in. They have to re-render the whole thing, and it becomes very taxing. So, you know, what they want to do is move their view layer to React, or certain sections of their view layer to React, because of the fact it can do these things, and see if they can get good performance boost by that way. So that's quite interesting, that you can use React in, you know, existing applications such as Backbone. Along with the React stuff though, so that's this awesome, you know, text source type thing. You then have like an idea of it's an architectural pattern, and that's called Flux, and that's another thing that kind of is very much entwined with React, because you kind of think of it together, but really they are two separate things and can be used in separate ways. And the idea of Flux is it's this unidirectional, so one direction pattern or flow of of execution within your application. And it's a very simple way of thinking, but it's very hard to kind of change your mindset to think that way. The closest you could probably think of it is that it's an MVC pattern, but without the controllers. So you have the models and the views, but there is no one governing between, because they're mainly view controllers kind of thing. And essentially what happens is you have, and it's amazing how this such simple idea, you can build big applications from it. I was very skeptical at first, but you can build big applications from it. And essentially, so you have, the idea is that you have an action. So an action gets called, the user instigates an action creator, which creates an action, such as, maybe I'm adding this user. Adding a user action then fires off a dispatch call. So it's a very much like a glorified pub sub type thing, where, it will send off a dispatch call. Oh, by the way, the action, add user with the parameters, or what the new JSON, representation of that user is. That then gets picked up by the stores. And the stores then will listen on this thing saying, oh, do I need to handle adding a user? Certainly the user store does. The user store will be like, oh, I need to handle that. So internally it will then do its representation of like, oh, I'm storing this user. Maybe it will say when it stored it or something like that, as well. So it's done a little bit of logic itself. Then what that does then is fire off a change event saying, by the way, guys, I've changed. The store has now changed. The store changes, and any view components, any components, and this is typically where the React stuff comes in, any components that care about it will say, oh, you've changed. Okay. And it will go back to the source of truth, and which is the store itself, and go, what have you changed? So it will then go, oh, where do I get my new, not what's changed, sorry, but where do I get my information from? So the information it needs is such as maybe the view component for listing them says, I need a list of all of the users, and I need to, render it this way. One of the beautiful things, and I'm kind of going off on a bit of a tangent, but I really love this, is kind of like, I started sending messages. Source of truth is a really interesting thing. Source of truth is very easy to understand, but very hard to do, because it can be, you can kind of liquidate, and you can kind of, pollute things and stuff like that very easily. The stores maintain a source of truth. I can only know about user information, the truth about the user information is through this store. And the way I do that, is by querying the store. So normally typically what I would think of doing is, because the stores are actually static and global, which is a very weird thing to think of, but it works. And that's all I can kind of say at the moment, is it works. Is what you do is because it's using the pub sub model, it's still broken up. It is still broken up. But essentially what happens is, I don't know what I'm talking about. Sorry, I'm completely lost train of thought there. No, essentially what happens is, that you always are asking for the representation, so you're always getting back that information. But with the event listener stuff and listening and sending events, typically what I would do is say, oh, by the way, this is what the new information is. So you'd may send on change, fire the event, and say, by the way, this is the new person's name. Well, if you get the new person's name, you've now liquidated that source of truth, because the source of truth of that person's name is both in the store and in that message you've sent. But you have no control over that message anymore that's been sent to these events. Something could happen in between that, and the person's name can change from Joe Blogs to Sally Ann or something. You don't know, because it's messages, you've now duplicated the source of truth. I may be representing now in that component, may go, oh, I'm updated, I'm now called Sally Ann, but really you're Joe Blogs. So what you do instead is you just send a message saying, I've changed. And if it's changed, it will then go back and query at the time it wants to, the store for the information. That then allows you to maintain that source of truth. And it was interesting last week, actually, we were having, again, it's this kind of very weird that you're like, oh, we're breaking source of truth here, because we were doing messaging. And messaging in the set of notification area. So you use a notification area. And the idea was, that say an error happens. So a message, so we've got the idea of pending messages. Pending messages, if you try and put in a phone number in a pending message, or try and send a phone number in a message, but you haven't, you're interested, or you're in, you're a new lead, or you're in an interested state and you're not been shortlisted, it's an error. You shouldn't be able to put in a phone number. So what happens is we send it off to the client, to the server. Sorry, the server comes back saying, sorry, 400 error. You can't use, invalid data, bad request. We then will add that. Then the store then knows, this message has an error to it. So the message store, handles it and says, I've got an error. But what we were also doing was handling a message store or a notification store. Sorry, that was saying, you've got an error. I'm going to create a new error message, and it would display it on the screen. Again, though, we are now making two sources of truth, because the message knows about it being an error, and so does this notification. So, but they're two distinct things. One can't control the other. So what's happening there is that if I update and it says, oh no, the error's gone now in the message store, this error is going to be around for whatever, So it's interesting that, and it's like, actually, really what you need to do is, again, it's to represent all the components are representations of the components. All the components are representations of the stores. And essentially what you do is you constantly are querying these stores. So the way you do it, instead of creating a new message, is the message would be like, have you got any store message? It would constantly be saying, query in the store. Does the store have any errors, and display them? And constantly doing that on change on all of them, it would listen. So it's a different way. Again, it's very simple, and you can draw it in one simple diagram, but actually implementing it and using it can be quite tricky.
I feel like you should come with some sort of health warning, because I might do something I think I'm really clever, and then I'll speak to you for 10 seconds and I realise how little I know, and I just want to hide in a cave and have a typewriter, and that's as far as I want to go with technology.
This stuff, right, man? It's like, I'm only learning it because I'm learning it because I love it, but also because we're doing it at work and stuff, and it is a completely different learning curve now, with these things, and it's great,
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and if I had the time, I'd love to have a play with React, but I guess I need to get my head around a lot of these things. So I still struggle with the idea of why we're using sort of these more front end technologies for rendering content. And
see, now that's it's like business logic. Where should you've got a valuable product and you're just dumping it all in minified JS, but it doesn't really matter if it's minified or not. People could still, look at it. They could have a pretty good way of reverse engineering it. You put all this on, so you put the whole web app onto the client. Well, it's great for the client because the client's quicker, stuff like that. But you've now lost all the value. All the value is now with the client. The client could easily just save that, and it's done pretty much in that essence. How do you split? And it's where you split. Because a lot of people typically now they go with a very clever client and a dumb server, which is hilarious because we used to think of it the complete opposite way, where the client would do simple visual changes, maybe like, you've done a little bit of validation error or something, but all the real logic would happen on the server. But essentially now what's happening is the server's just for persistence. The server's like, dumb store kind of thing, which is crazy to think that we kind of do that. And it is true that you have to work out where you split it, because I know you're very much like me, where you're like a bit hesitant putting a lot of logic on the server, on the client side. Sorry.
Yeah. Definitely.
And there's this whole buzz thing of isomorphic JavaScript, which is essentially code that runs on the server and on the client, and it runs the same. So because things like Google, even though they do a good job at rendering JavaScript on your pages, giving them a what you want to be able to do is be able to give someone a static implementation of the thing. So say like the page is being rendered by JavaScript normally, you then want to render it on the server and then give back a static implementation as well. This idea of isomorphic JavaScript happens, and even though it's just it's a fancy word for essentially it runs on the server and the client, and that's one thing I've been playing around with quite a lot with all this ES6 JavaScript stuff. I definitely need to start looking at some of this kind of stuff, because I'm doing just kind of fallen into it really recently, building a lot big sort of JavaScript applications, and whilst I wouldn't say my code's horrific, just the structure is pretty poor, and I think some of these frameworks and some of these tools would really help me clean that up, I guess. But I think I guess one of my biggest fears with putting more workload on the front end is I just find debugging it is harder actually, but maybe that's just lack of experience. No, I mean, you know what, right? You're right though. Essentially now any bug that happens is happening on the client. And
Yeah.
how do you know that? You know, you get nice server logs. You know, I mean, the great thing about you hook up Monolog and you've got it on your application, and you know, if there's an error happens, you know, we'll get this big old stack trace.
Yeah.
Think about that now. That's on your own controlled hardware. Now you're giving it to every client their own implementation on their computer. You're now giving them, you know, the code, and it's got to work. And we will get in that now, where we've been playing around with a lot of different tools for this. One of them's the New Relic stuff, the browser stuff they do, and they do some great logging and stuff like that, where, you know, because what essentially happens is all these tools there's a window on error handler. And what happens is JavaScript, you know, you can bind to that and you can say, listen to that, sorry. And what these do is they fire off and they'll try and grab as much information as possible in the browser. So if there was an error happened, and send it off, and then you can log that and you can analyze that. One of them was New Relic, which was great. You know, I mean, you know, it's quite expensive though. And we found that it doesn't really give us all the information we want, in a nice way. Another one is, we're using now is Reception. Now, Reception is very cool. And you know, we're having a lot of good stuff with that. Got a lot of good, getting a lot of good information out, and we've now hooked it up even to our hip chat as well. So, you know, we're getting the JavaScript errors when they come through as well. And one of the annoyingest things is the fact that certain mobile network operators, I think Vodafone is one of them, actually injects crap into your pages. So it actually injects, so you get this BMI underscore sidebar or whatever it's called, or side load or some rubbish, and essentially it's making an error on the page. It's because they're injecting stuff on their network. They're doing it to
control then of like your application.
You know what?
Really,
you lose. I mean, unless it's HTTPS, you know, if it's a clear, you know, they can do that, because, you know, they know what's going on, you know, so they can say, it's a page. I'll just, you know, add this in, I inject this crap in. And we get all these errors, and we have to ignore them because we can't do anything about them. I mean, there's a couple of header tricks you can do, but it's a bit of a pain. So that's a bit of a pain anyway. So, but that's on another tangent. But, you know, what we've doing is we are now using stuff like Reception. And, I mean, another thing is you minify the source. So you minify the source, you get a stack trace back, and the stack trace is on the source, or on the minified source. And you're like, well, that's great. How am I going to work that out? So what you have, these things are called source maps. And essentially, and I've been playing around with them last night, and they look so strange. I'm glad the computer understands them, because they are crazy. Essentially, what they do is they do the complete opposite of what the minify does. So you have the minify, you also say, I want a source map from this. And essentially what happens is it's able to, from the source map, rebuild the source code. So these like receptions and stuff, they know the location of our source map, and they know the location of the file. So they know there's an error in this file. We get this horrible minified version and say, give me the source map version. Essentially, it will then, you know, reproduce the source code for us so we can actually see real line numbers. You know, you get this a lot, like Webpack is able to do. I'm sure all the other ones are able to do it, like Browserify and Grunt stuff and everything, you know, getting this kind of real line numbers based on, you know, what you're actually getting in production, you know, or even in development mode, and you can do kind of cool things. But yeah, it's really interesting. Errors and stuff, handling these things are completely different. And you do rely a lot on the fact that they're using good hardware. Well, good software now, you know, good versions of things. And it's kind of scary, you know, but the days are now, I mean, like, if we're now not supporting IE8, that's beautiful for us. We're very lucky to do that, because now that removes a whole other browser that could have problems. You know, if our lowest common denominator now is IE9. I mean, actually talking about browser stuff, I think the stock Android browser has now become my new IE6. I hate it.
Really?
So the stock Android browser. Sorry, I'll keep ranting on. But the stock Android browser essentially is, well, it's a WebKit implementation. It's now been discontinued, so they no longer support it. But 22% of all mobile users use the stock Android browser, which isn't supported anymore. Okay. And obviously they do, because what they do is they go on their phone, they get a phone, it says internet on it. Oh, this is how you get on the internet. So we have to support it, even though it's not really supported. And it is such a pain to debug with, because, so what we do, you know, with iOS implementation, so iOS, you know, you can hook up your phone and you can hook up on the simulator and you can get the console debug logs and stuff like that through Safari, which is quite nice. You could also do that with the Android emulators using Genie Motion, which I remember you talking about before, and I can't get enough of Genie Motion. It is amazing.
Superb, isn't it? Really
amazing
good,
bit of kit there. And, you can do that with Chrome because Chrome has a debug implementation that you can now, interface with. Stock Android browser, though, has none of that. So all you can do, and there was a blog post that I put in the show notes as well, which is like, how do you debug for this? So, essentially you can say, I'm not going to support stock browser, Android browser. Well, we can't do that because 22% of, these mobile users use it.
Isn't it?
It's huge. It's more than what Chrome is. I mean, that's ridiculous. So they've just, it boggles the mind. But yes, so essentially what you can do is you can then, you can use rudimentary commands, interacting with the JavaScript using the URL, or you can use something called, I'm going to spell it Wiener, even though it's called Web Inspector Remote. And all they've done is take the first two characters of each of those words, and it's called Wiener. And essentially, what it is it's kind of like JS Console, which is a program like a web application that's Remy's the guy from CentOS, but Rem, the guy who made JS Bin. He made, and what it does is you put this code in. It's a Node application. You run it on the command line. It then creates a little server for you that you then inject this code into your header of your file. So I put it on at the moment when I'm debugging. I've got it in there, and essentially what happens is it hijacks. It listens and it can actually create, similar to what the WebKit inspector looks like. It's able to build that representation just through this JavaScript on a page that you've loaded in Android or in any device, really. So I can now look at the console logs and stuff like that. And I'm hoping to do a blog post on it, but I'm definitely going to put it in the show notes because these two together, the Genie Motion and Wiener, for stock Android browsing is just the bare minimum you need, especially when it's it is a JavaScript application that you're running. But yeah, so we're getting a lot of interesting things with that. And anyway, I'm gonna let you talk now because I think I've been chatting for way too long.
I don't know if I can say anything. My head's just kind of exploding. But no, it was really interesting stuff, to be honest with you. And I was gonna say, when you started with this, you seem like you're a convert now. You didn't seem too impressed by the idea of getting into React when you first started.
I think for me, like the whole JavaScript stuff, I haven't done loads of it. So, but then when you get the chance to do it on a day-to-day basis, you learn, you fall in love with it. You fall in love with anything, and like ES6 for me is great. And I love it, and you kind of take advantage of what you can. And it is a learning curve though. It's the whole, not only the fact of the using this language, but it's also the fact of like the React stuff, the Flux stuff, but then it's also the Webpack stuff and dealing with, because how do you bundle the application? How do you log it? How do you bundle it? How do you package it up for production? How do we want to, to test these things? We're going through a lot of testing phases and stuff like that. We have to write a lot of docs on that. And I think there's still a lot more writing that we need to do internally of how we do things and stuff, because it's been very much a learning experience as well. But it's been really interesting. Yeah. And the work that Facebook have done is really, really good. And I mean, it's funny because their kind of example, the reason why they made React and Flux was because they had, I think it was the fact that they had unread message counter on their on the homepage, or on Facebook's homepage when you log in, then they had, it was updating, so you view the message, and the fact that you click on this message, that a Facebook counter should now update to 0. If you've unread message, I'll click on that, I go to it's unread now, the little counter should update to 0 as well. And they were finding it very hard doing it, with this two-way binding. And they felt, going through stores now, single source of truth. Again, those now are two components that are now querying the same store. So it's saying, I'm updated now, and then it's the change event. This kind of way of thinking really does make you go, oh yeah, that works really well. Yeah. Well,
I'm going to have to check it out at some point, definitely. So you've been up to anything else in your free time, or you just trying to keep away from it at the minute?
So in my free time, actually, I've been, so it's interesting, like this weekend I went to a good friend of mine, Gavin Chan's wedding up in London, which was nice. He used to work, well, I'd never heard of him. Well, he's a lovely guy. And I was talking to Will, the designer. He came along, and about kind of design stuff. And it's interesting because that's a whole other world design stuff. And this MailChimp, a guy from MailChimp who works as a product engineer designer there, he wrote a book called Designing Emotion, or like emotional design, and his name's Aaron Walter, and he did a talk on it. and it's really interesting. And I'll put it in the show notes. It's really, really interesting designing for emotion, designing things that matter, and make people care. And again, it blows my mind because we all handle just this code, so we're looking at code, and that really is our kind of sweet spot, our bread and butter. But really, design is packaged up. It was funny, we made a joke where people would say, "Oh, what do you do?" We're like, "Well, we work, we're developers." Essentially, you could both, people think of design like the way we work: design, product design, and development in one big bundle. We create something. But actually, they're two very separate but very, very mutually needed things. You need designers to make something good. You need designers to make, a product appealing. And you need developers to be able to help develop the application to actually make it do something. So,
yes,
neither of them are better or worse than the other. They're both needed.
But also, that term designer has kind of been hijacked a little bit because, like the book that I've been reading recently, the Gang of Four book, says that actually you're a designer before you're a developer. You're a designer of code. So I know we're talking like
that's interesting.
But
design. Yeah, you're designing code and you're designing UXs, interfaces. So that's interesting. Actually,
absolutely.
You can kind of think
we
of
just think of design as being like an aesthetic thing, but it's actually design. It's like the architectural side of the code, isn't it? So we are like, I say, I'm not a designer, I'm a developer, but actually you are a designer as well, but just in a very different respect. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's the two parts are absolutely crucial, and if one of those suffers, then the whole project suffers, doesn't it? I guess.
Well, this is it. No one wants to use your product if it looks crap. No one wants to use your product if it doesn't do what it needs to do. It's a funny thing. So no, I mean, I really want it. That's one of the things I want to get into a lot more is the kind of design stuff. At least appreciating it more. I feel, I kind of feel at least if I put some time into actually appreciating it, at least I can understand how scary and big it is, and it's not just a liquor paint on, I'll reskin this, will you? Kind of feeling. There is actually a lot to it. And, let's do a reskin of it, oh yeah, kind of belittling the hard work that goes into these type of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's very cool, man. Nice one. So anything else you've been up to, or is that about it, really?
I think I've kind of just, I think me in a nutshell, me in like a massive nutshell, because I think I've kind of like hijacked the mic. Other than that, that's been me, man. Like the JavaScript stuff, it's mainly been, I did write a blog post. I think I spoke about it a while ago. It was about binary search trees, and I'm going to be doing one on AVL trees. That's one thing I want to do, but that's kind of like a tech blog kind of thing we do at our work. I am actually in the process of moving my blog, my personal blog, over to Jekyll. I've taken it. I'm taking the steps. I'm now redesigning my blog, and it's going on Jekyll.
How come?
Purely for the fact of ease. I'm actually starting to think, do I even need a DigitalOcean box? The price is fine. I mean, the price is nothing. It's only $5 a month, so I probably will keep it anyway. But for the fact that, being able to push up to GitHub and then it hosting it and stuff, it just seems such an easy thing to do. And I really want to redesign my blog. I'm getting bored of the design now, and I want a nice, simple kind of blog interface design without what I've got a bit of cruft around it. So yeah, it's going well. I mean, how is your blog? Are you doing any personal blogging, any things like that at the moment, or you must be swamped though, to be fair?
One of the things I'd like to, we talked about doing in like the next few podcasts and stuff is like some Git tutorials.
Yeah, so you want to get on the, we want to get, so actually saying that, I should probably mention, I recorded a couple of days ago another screencast with Joe Watkins, which is a really good one. So he's actually implemented a fixed array implementation in C as a PHP extension, similar to like the SPL fixed array, but we go through it, building it up bit by bit and everything, and it's a great tutorial. Great screencast. We listened to all the feedback and stuff we got from the last one, and we kind of feel that we've done a better job this time. And I'm going to make sure do a much better job at editing, because I think that's where the downfall was last time.
Well, I think you've done a fantastic job anyway, and the editing side of things is hard because you're balancing your job and all your other stuff. So, but I'm sure it'll be awesome. But we'd like to do. Well, I'd like to do some Git stuff because again, it's one of my like areas I feel really guilty about that I don't know too much about, and I have like a Bitbucket account and I sort of push stuff up, but that's about as far as it gets. So to really like get an understanding of that. So it'd be good to do just some like initial introductory like podcasts on what it is, what it does, and then like doing some screencasts, like you say, on like really actually using it and that kind of stuff. So unless any like the listeners really don't want that, but
I think they will. I think the thing is it's one of those things where it's easy to do once you're doing it. Like, now it became a part of thing. I can't think of life without using version control on a daily basis at work. It'd be stupid not to. But the thing is, though, is obviously it's trying to bring it into a company or trying to do that, and a lot of people will be doing that, and people trying to sell the benefits. But if people are sold on it, it's very easy to use it and very easy to do because they're sold on it. It's the way it's going to happen. The software's been designed and architected, and the development process has been designed and architected in such a way that works. But it's trying to get a code base that you've already got, or a workshop that you're already using, a workshop, a shop, but people to actually use these things and invest in, and it's trying to find that way to do it. And I think screencasts and talking about it is a really good idea, and I'll be more than happy. We can get Screen Hero going. I mean, that's another thing actually we should talk about, Screen Hero. I mean, how awesome is that, eh? I mean,
it is very awesome, actually.
Ken Beck spoke about it, on an episode with Adam Watham, and I've been using it ever since. I really hope Slack don't destroy it. They've brought it out, and I really please don't destroy it.
So you keep saying this. Have you got like any like signals that they're going to, or
the annoying thing is no matter what, you're gonna have to get a Slack account, which is fine. Yeah. And you're going to have to pay extra on a Slack account because you're going to get this as an extra fee. Because they're very clever, because what they've done is they've onboarded you by... it's really interesting, actually, again, talking to more product people, the way they worked is that, so they've been, like, they do a free tier. And you're using a free tier, aren't you? You've now... And what you've done is you've slowly polluted and you've sneaked in under the radar into all these developers' lives. Now product teams are using Slack. You're now using Slack. Yeah. Could you think of a world now without using Slack almost, or that kind of IM instant messaging stuff? Would you want to go back to Skype? Do you like the benefits of the fact that Slack provides?
But do you know what? I think the thing is, like, I understand what you're saying, but like something like our CRM and stuff, like we've got lots of content that's like up there in a server that it'd be a nightmare to move. But with Slack, you're not, like, say some other developers come along and say, well, we're going to produce completely open source alternative. It wouldn't be hard to move away, would it?
It wouldn't, but the thing is you are and you aren't. Like, that information, so I typically Google, like we use HipChat, and I do typically like say, I need to go back and find what we were talking about back then, and I need the archives. So what they do is they only allow you to search archives, I think, on a premium tier. So, and this is clever because now that you're using it, now you've got to do it that way. Say you want to start video chats and stuff. Well, all the people are already using Slack. I don't want them to have to install something else, so you need to pay up for that and stuff. So, clever things they're done. I think having a free tier that you slowly get people in and then onboarding them that way is a very clever idea.
Sneaky,
it is sneaky, but it's a brilliant way because people, I mean, again, we were talking about it with Adam Watham, and he was talking about it where, with Ian Landsman, the guy who did Userscape and stuff like that, and he was saying, developers are fickle. We are a fickle bunch. We will drop at the sign of anything. We will say, oh no, I'm not using that anymore. I'll use something else. We're not loyal. And rightfully so, because you get loyal to certain things, like classic ASP, and what's the point?
I am.
You are loyal classic ASP, user, and this is the thing, like that becomes you, and it's like, no, you need to be able to drop and move. This is the thing, duck and weave. Development's all about ducking and weaving. There we go.
That is true. So I have two other final points, if I may. First one is, I think you told me about this, the kind of like shortened if statement thing for P7.
The coalesce null operator. Yeah,
but I thought it looked horrible. Someone put it on Twitter. I was like, no, I don't like that at all. Like,
well, it's come from C# actually.
Doesn't look like it should work. I don't know.
So essentially what it is we have at the moment, the kind of, I can't remember what it's called. But it's essentially, I think it's the Elvis operator. I think that's what they call it, or whatever it's called. It's like we have the ability to just do a question mark, colon, and then do something. Yeah. So if this value is not null, use it, else use this. And that's fine. That's great, but it's for is set ones. So say like, is this get variable set, use it, else use null or use a default. You get this also with like objects and stuff. So say like, is this value here, else use this. So I'm actually using it in the AVL tree where, I was checking that this, so I wanted to make sure that this, so what actually happened was there was my left child's left child was available, was present. So, and typically you'd have to do this if and do this horrible ternary thing because you'd have to always make sure that it's available before checking. But with this null coalesce, it actually does an is set kind of operation, or it does do an is set operation. And essentially, it would check to say, okay, is this set this value? So I could do, go down the chain. If it is, I'm now going to get the value for that and use that. Else, I'm going to use a default. So it may look a bit ugly, but it's very useful, and I reckon you will like it. I reckon you will start using it.
They come around eventually. Yeah. The other thing is, have you used Windows 10?
No comment. No. I mean, to be honest, it was funny. We were looking at user agent stats again, and I think it's like 0.2 or 3% of our users actually use Windows 10 at the moment.
It's going to change dramatically over the next 6 months, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, have you been using Windows 10?
I've seen people at work using it, and so far they've been quite complimentary about it.
What is the difference? Like, is it essentially what Windows 7 is to Windows Vista, where they fixed all the stuff that should have been fixed in Windows 8?
That's the exact comparison that someone said to me this morning, actually. Yeah, I think that's about it. But,
I don't want to... I hate acting like a snob, but I'm just so glad that I don't have to deal with that crap. Like,
yeah, me too.
I love Macs, and I love the Unix architecture. I love the command line, and I don't want to be dealing with Windows. And it was interesting, like thinking about developing on a Windows machine now. I would hate that. I'd probably get used to it, but I don't enjoy it. I prefer a Mac.
Yeah.
And that's us being snobs. That is being Apple fanboys.
And happy. Yeah.
And happy. Exactly. Happy lives if you use a Mac. There we go.
And just going back to a previous point, like talking about the criticism of Laravel, it was Anthony Ferreira who was.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping still to get on the show. I mean, he is a big voice.
Exactly.
He is a big voice in it. But
that's why I didn't get involved, because I love both those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, it's this whole idea. People just want to say, they have comments they want to say and stuff like that. I don't think it's personal. I mean, passionate about what they do. But no, it's interesting. And he's doing a lot of cool work. And I like staying away from that stuff. I believe we're all great. We all get on with what we're doing. And people are going to have positive feelings towards things and negative feelings toward things. But all in all, we're all trying to make the world a better place. Isn't that what development's about? I'm trying to find a really positive way to, end the show,
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, man, but it's been a great podcast, dude. And great. Thank you for the catch up again. That sounds pretty bad. I'm going to say thank you for the catch up. No, it's been a great podcast, man. And it's been great having you back on the show. It seems like ages since I last spoke to you. But hopefully we'll get on with doing a couple more. Going to get all of us involved and stuff. Would be great.
And do some Git stuff.
Do some Git stuff. That'll be it, because you'd be Git not to. But no, that'd be awesome. All right then, audience. Well, it's been great talking to you. Talking at you. Again. And we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Stay classy. Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.